of it just, it was an
Is it a
informal.
throwaway number? Or is it,
It can't be anything but. I
Yeah.
mean, even
Oh,
half that's
God.
throwaway.
Yeah, it really is. That's just,
Absurd. Yeah, why bother?
who put that number
I
out
think the
there?
school committee wanted the superintendent to do something, and she really wasn't ready, so, you know, like,
Waste of effort. Yeah.
it was, yeah.
Why put a number out there like that
I know,
initially?
I know.
And it's,
Yeah.
it's,
Carrie's outside.
Yeah, I replied back to her when she sent it and said, great, we're doing a GoFundMe
Thank you. Okay, good evening and welcome. I'll call the meeting to order on behalf of FinCom for January 8th. Kickoff to the official budget. Well, I guess it's past our kickoff. I guess we had our Saturday kickoff, but we're now in the throes, and it's definitely a thick of it. So we'll have full committee representation tonight. As I mentioned, David will be a little bit late, but we're quorum and then some. So first up on the agenda is an RFT, or reserve fund transfer for the not permitting software, but the GIS software, right, for the
Assessor
assessor
software.
software, yeah.
Yeah, so, our chief assessor, Steve, I'm
Yeah.
not gonna try his last name.
Zahowski.
Osowski?
Oh, Zahowski.
Zahowski.
There you go.
Hey, Dave. So Steve was,
Thank you.
Steve was made aware by Vision Software that they were no longer going to be supporting and upgrading though that program that program. So they said, what, you can spend $5,000 and upgrade to our newest version. So Steve looked around, and being a Hamilton assessor, Board of Assessor, Hamilton's actually looking at going at Patriot. So he asked Patriot, what would it cost for Wenham to convert from Assess Pro to, from Vision to Assess Pro, so.
Which is the Patriot,
Which is
right?
the Patriot, yeah. Patriot is the one that a lot of communities use. I used it in Littleton, Beverly uses it. It's the more widely used program. So Steve got a price of, well, it was gonna cost, again, for $5,000 to convert, plus a maintenance, annual maintenance agreement of $6,500, which is pretty high. So Patriot.
Is that a license fee?
Yeah, that's, they call it a maintenance agreement.
Support, help.
Support, help.
Okay. It's basically your user license, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's the biggest
Or
thing that Vision does
service.
annually is take the Vision software that the assessors are using and get it prepared to go on the property cards that are on the website. If you go on the public portal, that's a huge portion.
So Patriot gave us a price of $9,000, and their annual maintenance is $2,500. So it really made sense for the long term to do the conversion to Patriot. I think it's a better product, and I think it's gonna save money for the town going down the road. So, and the reason why we're asking for it now is because they said, you know, January 14th is their date. Can you still use it? Yes, we can still use Vision, but, you know, it'd be better to start that conversion and get away from that. So that's why the request for the $9,000.
I'd like to say too, Visions, their customer support's not very good, from what I understand from Steve. When we did our reval last year and going to do the tax recapping, set the tax rate, he had a lot of issues with running the reports out of Vision, and he was calling for help, and there was no help to him. He ended up having to call some guru that he knows that works in Hamilton or somewhere to come over, and he was able to get it to work, that Vision couldn't do it. So I think from his also understanding is Patriots, from their tech support, has been calling him right back and been a lot more helpful than Vision has been in the past few years as well.
Is that an annual cost, 9,000, or is that the
No,
start?
that's the one
one-time.
time.
One-time start?
And then it'll be 2,500 annually starting
Annual,
July
okay.
1st. So it won't even be for this current fiscal year. The 2,500 will start in July 1.
2,500 annually.
Is anyone against this? Upgrade or changeover?
The selectmen did take a vote last night to just, in support of this, and they wanted that information, that vote portrayed to this body to let you know.
Thanks.
Where's the money coming from? Free cash?
Reserve.
Reserve.
Reserves.
Reserve, so how much is left in reserve?
There is about 65,000
Okay,
Before or after this?
before this,
yeah,
because
okay.
we've done the ambulance,
Yep.
and then about 2,500 for the veterans.
That's right, I forgot the veterans, yeah.
So a couple quick things. I think this makes sense. Steve had mentioned it before. I mean,
He did, at the
talked
budget
about it.
meeting.
And I think even in the past, does anyone else recall, like a year ago, him mentioning that
Probably
we
when he
might-
was giving you the update on the reval, because that's when the
That's when it
issues with
was.
vision,
Yeah.
Right.
you know, their IT has not been great for a while in terms of the support they've given to Steve. But the reval last year was a huge challenge, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's when it was brought up, because, you know, I work right across the hall from Steve, and, you know, he really was calling and calling and calling and not getting the support that we need. And the reval, you know, doesn't happen often, but it happens often enough that when you go to do something like pull a report, you want to make sure it's working, and more importantly, that it's accurate. And that was the big struggle, is that there were reports he was pulling, but they weren't always the accurate reports. And, you know, you don't want to, it's a challenge to go to the DOR with report after report that aren't pulling accurately because of the software issue and not because of a misinformation issue. So I think that was a big concern for the reval, which was a very extensive process.
From my perspective, for a community that relies on its residential tax base almost exclusively, you have to have that part of it supported from a data availability and, you know, integrity of the data, so.
Without assessing, you're really cutting yourself off at your knees, because if you're not assessing well and appropriately and in timely manner, then you're missing out on that assessed value very quickly.
Conversion of the data over from one system, isn't there some, in the letter that outlined all the details in this, which I don't think we have a printed copy of in front of us tonight, but that talked about, I think, the conversion, right, from.
Yeah, the cost, yeah.
Yeah, and is that the 5, wasn't there like I wanna say like a 5,000 for the upgrade if we were to stick with Vision.
And
Go
upgrade
their
to the
newer
new Vision.
version. Right. But didn't Patriot have some sort of negotiated conversion cost in there, or no? that they
So
negotiated?
initially, it was $10,000, and then when we met with him,
Yeah.
and, you know, I had talked to him and said, he says, you know, how do you come up with that conversion cost? You know, is it the same for every community? And I said, you know, we're only talking 1,400 households here in Wenham, you know, can you do something for us? We knocked off $1,000.
Out of 9. All right. Save a grand. Good. Cool. All right. Make a motion.
I am reading documents, I'm not just sitting on my phone.
Yeah, I was gonna do the same, and I meant to mention that, thank you, so people didn't think I was like texting. So I'll make a motion, then we can, of course, have any other questions or discussions needed. I move that FinCom approve the reserve fund transfer in the amount of $9,000 to be transferred to, this be assessor's office?
Okay, yes.
Okay. Balance in said appropriation, 0, and for the purpose of the conversion to Patriot from Vision Software.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Are we missing anything, or questions or concerns? No? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to a vote then. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Do you want me to write in assessors on that, where it's going to?
Oh, I think that was there, yes.
Or do you want to? I can
If you want, sorry.
write assessor's office, is that
Assessor's expense.
Capital.
assessor's
Capital.
capital? Okay.
Need some Jeopardy music for paperwork,
Yeah.
filling
Well,
out purposes.
might as well do it now. Wait until after the meeting. I'll get here for you, Chris. Thank you. Cool. I think we're continuing with a budget update next, right?
Yes.
Terrific.
So, our team here has been working diligently over the several weeks. And, you know, originally, we were starting at a structural deficit of 1.17.
1.131.
Okay.
Pretty
We went back, we've looked at some of the expenses. We were able to eliminate, how much was it?
About
Down.
60,000.
Yeah, about 60,000. So the deficit is down, although it didn't go away, unfortunately. So,
The capital went down. If I read your thing right.
Yeah, the capital did go down too. So what we're gonna do is, we're gonna start with the capital, and this is the presentation that the Board of Selectmen received yesterday morning. And we'll just go through this. If there's questions, you know, like we told them, by all means, if you have a question, you know, feel free to stop it. If it's not to get hung up on something, just to get through everything, if we have to revisit it, that might be best way to go after. So Jackie will start with the capital.
So in your binders, in the addition to your binders, there's 11 by 17 pages for the capital that can get added into your capital tab. But I'm just gonna highlight the changes which are also identified in the memo. So the biggest changes that we see in the capital budget, in IT, we have some savings where we had an old estimate from Jan, our former library director, in the IT budget for the server that was removed in favor of the IT server that's now in the library capital line, so that was a quick cost savings. We also, under IT capital, have a $10,000 reduction in infrastructure costs. Recently, we completed a regional IT assessment, and so we've...
Hold
Yes.
on. So you're not gonna, what she's saying, you're not gonna catch that on the
not
spreadsheet?
reflected
It's
here.
not, it's in the memo.
It's net of.
Yeah,
not
I'm just
out,
going- I'm just
right.
walking through the
wording
memo.
in the
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
And there was also a small reduction in the DPW capital line, based on a corrected lease payment amount. So those are the three changes, that are pretty straightforward, just updated numbers from December. The ones that I really wanna draw your attention to, first and foremost, is, the highway road capital line had a decrease of $45,000. At this point, we are looking, at trying to eliminate the loose leaf pickup, and we're trying to work with Bill to find a place for that would be reduced in the DPW budget. At this point, that's in the highway road capital line. So this, version of the capital plan does call for the elimination of the loose leaf pickup. We would still have a paper bag pickup via our trash contractor, but this would eliminate the leaf vacuum and the work going from street to street for a good 2 months of the DPW's time. Another item that I would call your attention to, in December, we presented $100,000 for the ambulance for either potential repair or replacement to our now backup ambulance. This was the ambulance that was damaged over the summer. Looking at some funding scenarios, we reviewed different styles of lease payments, purchasing things outright, and repairs, and we found that the most cost-effective solution was looking at a 4-year lease for an ambulance type 2, which is a similar van to the one that was purchased with the request fund transfer. So this is a policy decision for the selectmen as well if they want to pursue the backup ambulance, but in terms of finding a funding scenario that worked in our financial situation, we are looking at $30,000 roughly in the first year, and that's for year one of the lease and some accessories that we'd need to outfit the ambulance with, and then roughly $25,000 a year for the other 3 years of the lease. So again, this is a policy decision before this board and before the selectmen over the coming weeks of whether the boards want to pursue a second ambulance. But this is what we found looking at either refurbishing the old damaged ambulance or buying new. This was the most cost-effective solution at this time.
I think David had a
Was
question.
so we still have the old one, we never got rid of it.
We have the new one.
We have the new one, we haven't got rid
The
of the
new
old
one,
one.
we have the van that's online that was purchased with the request fund transfer, but we
Just-
never,
No, just answer
Yep.
the question.
Yes, we do have the old one
Right,
still.
okay.
yes.
And so where's your cost benefit? So what was the other figures? All this is showing is a lease to buy.
Mm-hmm.
What was the cost to fix?
So roughly, pretty much, even if you refurbish, and that's the ambulance that actually went out. So if they refurbish that one, you're talking about buying a new cab and a chassis, taking that box off and putting it on the new cab and chassis. That was one option. Another option was rebuilding the motor.
Right.
All of those were roughly, somewhere in the vicinity of $75,000 to $100,000.
To replace an engine? No.
The replacing the engine was on the lower side, but
Yeah.
it was still high from the dollar amount that Jeff gave us, because it was gonna be done by the dealer. So
20, 10,
it's that plus refurbishing the chassis, because you certainly don't wanna put a new engine into a cabin chassis that could be rotted underneath there. So there would have to be some work that would have to be done to refurbish the whole truck. So it wasn't just putting an engine in, it was making sure, if we're gonna put an engine in, that that truck can be around for 10 years or so. So that was one option. The other option was buy the cab and the chassis and do that. And the other option is what Jackie is presenting here, is if they got a similar ambulance to the one that we just purchased over the summer, what that would look like, and that's those numbers. So the fire department felt that that was the best.
One more question, if I may.
Choice.
Didn't mean to interrupt you.
Sure.
How many missed opportunities did we have? I.e., there was a call, we went out on an ambulance, there's another call.
We've
Oh,
asked-
I missed.
We've asked Jeff about that, he's gonna look into it and get us those numbers. The selectmen asked that same question
But we asked
yesterday.
that question months ago, too.
Yeah, in full disclosure, the selectmen still have, I think, what we're getting is some reservation with the ambulance, the engine for it.
Yeah,
Need
so,
more data to, you know, what's for the ambulance, what are the missed calls? How many times could we have done 2 pickups? What does that number look like? What is the mutual aid on the fire pumper? How many times do we give it? How many times do we receive mutual aid? So there was a lot of questions that the selectmen had as well that we don't have the answer to right now. We asked the fire department to get those answers, so that decisions can be made.
That's $100,000 plus.
Yeah.
Just one, did we have a backup ambulance before?
No, so we had
Okay,
that
so we've never
discussion,
had a-
right.
We've never had a backup. Do we have the option of contracting with an ambulance company to be our backup, and what would that cost be?
Oh, absolutely. If our ambulance went out right now, there's gonna be an ambulance that covers the town.
Right.
and we do
So,
for ALS anyway,
yeah,
right? I mean, we
right.
still have a ambulance coverage contract.
One of the issues now is, you know, we're relying upon that revenue. That revenue is built into our budget. So if we lost it for a period of time, anything over 30 days, they lose their certification. And which-
Our existing ambulance.
Our
if we-
existing ambulance,
If we
right.
lost that.
So if we lost that, not only are we gonna lose the revenue, if it goes over 30 days, they'd have to lose their certification, then there could be months before we're back in the business, and then we're not gonna have that revenue coming in.
And can I clarify one piece of that too, that we didn't actually talk about yesterday, is that regardless of who's answering the BLS calls, so ALS is answered by our contracted service, but the BLS calls are the ones we're doing with our local ambulance. So regardless of if we have a BLS ambulance online or offline, our firefighters, EMTs, and paramedics are still responding to those calls. So not only is the ambulance an important source of revenue, it means that we're making up for those call wages, because we have to have those folks going to that call regardless. So the ambulance does allow us to pick up money and get those reimbursements that we weren't getting before. And so that was another impact. So it wasn't just a loss of that revenue during the time when the ambulance was down. It was also that we were still having to pay out call wages. It's not as if our call firefighters and EMTs take a step back when Cataldo is the lead for the BLS. So we are still dealing with those costs as well. And I think to Anthony's point, something that we heard from the selectmen yesterday and we anticipated was that the chief and the deputy chief will be coming back to have a policy discussion about the life safety piece and the protection piece. I think what I wanted to provide for you today is that if it is something you are interested in pursuing, we do have a funding scenario that the fire department considers viable for service, but that we also can potentially afford in this budget cycle that is so challenging. So the policy decision piece is still very critical, and I'm sure you guys will be inviting Steve and Jeff in soon, but I just wanted to make sure you knew that, like, financially, this would be our strategy at this point in the
And
process.
it's the one that's being proposed at this point in the process.
Yes.
We don't want to get too far. This isn't an ambulance programmatic.
Yeah, this is a funding
There.
scenario
So,
strategy.
and all good questions, and you got one too, so ask it, but just to keep things moving, just broad strokes here, this is the current, budget season stage of where capital requests are. There are no way final, we're not voting on whether or not you're gonna tonight.
Yeah.
And I would also just add, even on the leaf pickup, I would say that there's a policy element there too.
Absolutely.
With respect to Board of Selectmen, so.
I don't think there's nothing here tonight that's not gonna be a policy discussion for this board and for the selectmen.
That's fair, that's fair.
I-
So that's it, you have a
My
question?
question was answered.
It was, okay.
Thank you.
So that's what we're looking at in terms of strategies for the ambulance. The fire department also is seeking to replace the 1999 KME pump. We have a pump and a ladder. This would be the pump that would go out to mutual aid calls. And again, the fire department will be here to discuss this. But we are looking at, in terms of funding scenarios, if this is something that the selectmen and FinCom wanted to pursue. We've looked at different options. Obviously, sorry, David, yes?
The reason I'm raising my hand, this lease to own or lease?
Lease to
Lease to
own.
own,
Got
yeah.
it. Thank you.
Both are lease to own options.
Thank you.
The purchase outright would be in the $475,000 range, but given that it's a lease, there's interest involved. There options that we looked at were a 10-year lease at $57,000 or a 5-year lease at $105K. The $57,000 made more sense for this fiscal situation. Going longer than 10 years though becomes a challenge because then you risk paying a lease on equipment that is starting to hit its end of life capacity. So at this point, from a funding scenario strategy, that's why we went with the 10-year $57,000 lease. So that's where we're going now if the boards both choose to move forward with bringing this ambulance to town meeting. Sorry? And so in your packets, in your tabs, in your updated information tonight, we have the leasing estimates for both of those vehicles. I won't spend a ton of more time on them, but they're in there if you wanted to review. You can see the different options for years, but that's why we went with the options that we did. Also, that's something that we've moved. The library director proposed the roof this year, along with our facilities director, Mike Curdy. We are looking to have an analysis done of the roof, but there is concern from our facilities director that it's hitting its end of life. As we all know, the library is hitting its 21st year very soon, and that's really the roof on these types of commercial roofs. We are getting some outside assessments done of the roof, but we anticipate this expense coming up soon, and we're showing it right now as a general funded capital item so that we could also show you the assessment from Hamilton. So any of these library capital items that we're discussing, they roughly total $93,000, but we'll get about $60,000 to $61,000 from Hamilton. So we've moved these capital items into the general fund so you could see the direct offset in our Hamilton assessment on the revenue side. So again, just trying to come up with some funding scenarios that make sense in this fiscal year as we start to get closer to making some policy decisions.
So that's all-in cost, or?
That's
our
everything, 1
portion?
year.
Okay.
This is all in, the whole kit and caboodle, so our cost is roughly 1/3, but we'd pay out and then Hamilton would pay us back for their 2/3 share. The library is also seeking a server. They're having a lot of challenges. Their server is becoming very out of date. And it's going to not be able to have the capacity for a lot of the software and programs that the library needs. It's currently a 2010 server, and as we know, IT goes by very quickly these days. And given the amount of items and softwares and programs on the server and its age, they are really going to have to essentially stop public services. There's going to be programs that end and softwares that end and services that end because the server is at capacity. So Kim Butler, our new library director, this is her first time going through the budget process, but for her, she identified this as a critical need for this year. And in terms of the capital overview, as Dave pointed out early on in the meeting, when we were meeting on December 7th, if you take a look at the memo on page 2, we had total unfunded capital requests on December 7th of $958,000 roughly, and total capital requests on that day of roughly $1.5 million. The proposed funding strategy that you see before you today has roughly total capital requests of $718,000, and we've broken down the funding sources to roughly $293,000 worth of free cash, $389,000 of capital in the operating. Oh, I'm sorry, Alex.
Sorry, just, you're moving fast, which is
I
great.
apologize,
I just
yeah.
want to catch up.
Yeah.
So the difference between the 958
Mhm.
and the 1.6, 1.57, whatever,
It's the leases,
so
right?
that is what was in the operating budget at that time, is that right?
The 958 was not, we had no funding sources for.
Right.
And then the balance of that, roughly, 600,000 was in either the operating budget or a
Okay.
revolving fund.
Got it, okay. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, I apologize if I'm going too quickly.
No, it's good. It's
Yeah,
good.
I over-caffeinated, I
Nope,
apologize.
that's fine.
So, as I mentioned, our total capital requests as of yesterday were at 718,000 roughly. So we have roughly $389,000 of capital in the operating budget. Most of those items are things that come up every year, like our replacement police cruiser, our leases that we're already in the second, third, or fourth year in, things that really we're already committed to. 293,000 is our recommended free cash, use of free cash for funding capital. And then we have smaller amounts, 25,000 through the Iron Rail revolving, 85,000 via the water department, and then we're expecting roughly $150,000 in Chapter 90 from the state. That's on target with the last 4 or 5 years. If someone knows something about that going up, please share. But we're not optimistic that that'll go up, not with where the state funding is. Mike?
I'm confused at something. Can you clarify something for me, please?
Absolutely.
The capital improvement program, the sheets you have here,
Yes.
I think I'm maybe misinterpreting something. Are we suggesting or saying that, I'm just picking, all these items we're going to fund or do? Or are they just a list of items?
I would say at this point, there are a list of capital items that are still on the table. And I would also say that there are a list that a lot of our department heads to consider to be critical capital items for both buildings and vehicles. So I think to Alex's point earlier, I think any of these capital items, we would have to have a policy discussion about whether a lot of them come down to loss of service or, you know, it's not just a capital item, it's a capital item that's, you know, a vehicle or a roof. So we really want to have a good conversation before they're taken off the table.
Because in the past, in some cases, we've pushed capital, you know, to the right. And
Well-
I'm getting a sense here that it's becoming harder to do now.
I think that's very true. I think we're in a place where we cannot push certain capital items. I think, you know, last year we had a lot of discussion about the COA roof. Jim offered if anyone wants to go check it out. So I think we're at a point with a lot of those capital items that we can't push them down the road any further. And I think on the other side of things, we're also looking to reduce our reliance on subsidizing the operating budget with free cash. We're trying to back out of the structural deficit. And so by having more of that free cash focusing on capital items via a free cash article, instead of putting those capital items in the general fund budget and then using the free cash to subsidize that budget, we're getting better to best practices and starting to really work ourselves out of that structural deficit that we've been facing. So I think it's a two-prong piece here, Mike, to your question is we've really had a lot of these capital items on our capital plan, even since we worked with MRI several years ago to develop this capital program. And at the same time,
Yeah.
we're trying to get to best practices.
There's, with any of these, you know, there's policy decisions to be made, but there's also consequences to those decisions. So, just like the fire pumper, you know, there's consequences to that, which we can talk in depth when the fire department's here, but, you know,
Okay.
some of them just, some stuff can't be kicked down the road any longer.
There's the question of funding strategy and source, right? Free cash or operating,
Yep.
whatever. And then there's overall affordability too.
Right.
Yeah.
With obviously the end result being anything that we don't offset via free cash, right? Just raises the override more. So,
And I think today what you have in front of you is, you know, we have that deficit number, that $1 million number, and just trying to get, you know, help you guys get your arms around the different projects and the funding scenarios that are available, so you have that when you're making those policy decisions.
Great, that's real helpful.
And the revenues that you have listed here for the capital, 25 for iron rail, 85 from the water department, those are all pretty assured numbers? I mean, are they?
Yes, the iron rail is that portion of the iron rail rentals that we've diverted from revenue into the revolving fund for the maintenance of the building. Majority of that is going to the payment of the ban. So that's, we took out a ban, which is a type, it's similar to a bond, to do the roof and the paving and some other work at the property. So the Iron Rail Revolving Fund is coming from the rentals of that building and going towards debt we went into for the maintenance of that building. And then the water department is coming from water department revenues. They've had some debt fall off in the past few years, which we've now started putting aside into water capital reserve for our infrastructure. They also are looking via the water revenue to update their SCADA system, which is the software that keeps all the pumps and all of the systems going. And I want to say Eric Mansfield said that system is from the 90s, off the top of my head.
Subject to an
So,
attack, right, too.
well, it's actually never been on the internet. So it's not a security thing. It's more of an age item. That it's just, but the new one actually will be like mobile accessible so that you can check on the pumps remotely.
And that 293 from the free cash, what does that leave us in free cash if we take the 293?
So we had 754,000?
Yeah.
950.
I mean, 954, so 250 per policy you're leaving in, and
We
minus
have-
up 293, so what's
we
the
have-
total?
We're at
400?
410 to be
410.
plugged into the budget.
Are we comfortable with that at this point, of 410?
I'm not gonna say I'm comfortable with it. I mean, I don't, I'm not gonna say it's the wrong,
Right.
I think.
Maybe
it goes
comfortable is
back
not
to
the right word, but we're in a ballpark.
Yeah, I mean,
It's not,
it's the way
it's
it's laid
better
out.
than 250, it's,
Yeah, it's the way it's laid out so far. So what did last year we used 700,000, down from 750,000,
Yeah.
right? So this would be, cutting
cutting in half
of that
almost, yeah.
roughly,
Yeah.
from what we used. And also keeping in mind that we're potentially adding some of those additional capital, choosing not to defer and having additional capital elements, so. And this is, of course, based on the placeholder for the schools of 3%, right?
Yeah.
So things could change materially. I think at this stage of the game, last year, we had, it's gonna test my memory, I should have dug out the memos, 900, and then we got it down to 600,
656.
right? I think we started with about
kinda
950 in structural deficit, maybe.
We're definitely at $1 million in December, and then we moved under $1 million. We did a little bit better moving in from December to January till we got to under $1 million.
Right.
But this year, I mean, Chris and I have gone through line by line. Anthony's gone through line by line. On the town side, there's just so little to cut until we start to talk about those cuts being significant personnel service related cuts. We've cut, what we can without impacting those things, without making those decisions for you.
And just to recall back when we were doing the financial forecast, excuse me, I have a cold. The free cash has been going down and down and down over the past 5 years. I think we showed that on a graph back then. So, we're trying to, at some point, we have to face that. And I think this is what this plan is attempting to do.
Right.
Reduce that
Definitely, yeah.
reliance.
Yeah, we tightened up revenue forecasts, right, so that's gonna happen, and,
Yeah, when you cut down your expenses and really start, being very
once
more
you're lean,
accurate
once you're
on
that lean,
revenue,
there's
you're
nowhere,
really
there's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
cutting yourself out of free cash because
Yeah.
you're gonna go right up to your spending limit
Right,
and you're not gonna get that much more revenue than you were expecting because we've been budgeting so closely.
I think Patty Moore had a great, she said it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that you budget lower so that you plug less free cash, but then you end up with less free cash, so you budget
Sure.
lower, and it just,
right.
it's gonna keep going
Yeah,
in that
a
direction.
few years ago, we were at 1.2 free cash, right?
Yeah.
In that
Yeah.
range,
Right.
now we're
What-
at
those were the days.
975, 950, well, yeah,
Yeah, but
okay.
That rock and hard place is getting bigger, so
Mm.
I understand what
It
you're
is.
saying.
yeah.
Yep.
But it's also good because it shows that we're building out of the structural deficit, which is positive.
Right.
It doesn't feel it, but it is.
Well, I mean, it definitely, I think, I for one believe that paying for one-time capital with free cash makes sense. So to your point, does this number make sense? I think we have to still have the big picture of what we're gonna do from a policy and overall, can we afford this, yes or not, and then the funding source.
The concept.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, the concept makes sense. I just think it's early to know exactly what the right number is,
Right.
but
Yeah.
what you've laid out here is.
It's just getting some numbers so that to start the conversation with, I think.
Exactly, yeah, no, it's very good.
So just to keep moving forward, we did have some department budgets that did not have any changes in this iteration, so these tabs in your binders are gonna remain the same compared to what we had in December. Assessor, town clerk, land use, building and grounds, iron rail, inspectional services, tree warden, snow and ice, cemetery, board of health, council on aging, and the water department. At this point, we don't see any cuts to these departments without looking at personnel or really significant
lean.
program and services. They're very lean. A lot of one person or two part-time people departments, so there's not a lot of, there hasn't.
Yeah,
there's-
and hopefully this slide will help the FinCom prioritize those other departments that you really want to look at. Not to say that you
Yeah.
won't go back to these, but
Right.
you did hear from the department heads on with these departments on the Saturday meeting.
I, these,
So they're the same numbers?
Same
these are
numbers.
the same
Numbers
numbers.
is a Saturday discussion.
Yes.
And so, were they level services across the board, or, maybe that's not the right term, there were some additional minor staffing requests
Yes.
from a couple.
Town clerk and the COA had some.
Right.
Did we cut back on the COA? We did cut
did.
back on
We
those.
did, we did cut back on the COA, but not significantly.
Yeah, we did reduce it. I think that Jim wanted,
It was
X
probably
number,
5,000 and we cut it to 3.
yeah, we,
Smaller in the grand scheme of things, that's.
just to make
Yeah.
it a little bit, we can't make that, quite that jump. So we put it
Phased
to
it.
what we thought was a reasonable.
Were they part-time or full-time? I don't remember.
Part-time.
Part-time, okay.
So
Okay.
definitely items to look at in these.
Jim.
Yeah, this is a little bit off, but have we had any discussion, a policy discussion, and not for tonight, on water rates?
No, so that's one of the things that we'll talk
Coming.
about a little bit is other for potential cost savings and ideas that we have, and
Oh, okay.
certainly
Is it-
water
okay.
we'll be talking about in a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah,
We
I'd
like your
to-
enthusiasm.
Well, something we've thrown this piece of spaghetti on the wall a little bit is, meals tax. Has there been any kind of analysis or discussion about that?
So I've asked,
I'm sorry.
Meals.
Meals
meal
tax?
adopting the local option on meals and room occupancy tax. So, the data that DOI has online, I can project between somewhere $10,000 to $15,000 that we could see. They stopped putting numbers out there, about a year ago. So I think most communities have adopted it, so that's why they stopped updating that information. I did send them an email back about 3 weeks ago and asked them if they could look at us more closely so I could get a better number, but they haven't gotten back to me. So room occupancy that's only since July, so that's, we only have a couple of Airbnbs that are doing some short-term rentals that we certainly can get 6%
Well,
out
there's
of.
also, a couple of retail establishments that sell food. There's some caterers,
Mhm.
and there's Gordon.
Yes.
So, but one thing that's unclear to me, if students are exempted from that, or if it's only faculty and staff who would be taxed on meals versus total sales.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't-
I think being an educational institution, I don't know
I don't think
that
they're
Gordon
subject to-
factors in.
I think there's portions of them that are. And Hamilton passed this a few years ago, and I'm hopefully gonna get some information from their research when they looked at like Gordon Conwell.
Well, it's not us that would make that decision, it's DOR. It's the CMR regs with regards to sales tax on meals. So all we would do is say, yes, we want our 0.75%, and that's what we would go to town meeting with. As far as what's taxable and what's not taxable, that's DOR's determination.
Yes, but it'd be interesting to see what it is and what the estimated revenue would be. If it's,
If
To
we
find
have
out
their number.
if it's worth it, and if we do it, what's the impact on revenue?
Well, we know what we do know right now is we could get anywhere between $10,000 to $15,000 that we're not getting right now.
But that is based on what, just
That's
grass-
based on
grassy
those
roots?
restaurants that are registered with the Commonwealth that are charging meals tax. So I know that we're missing out on $10,000 to $15,000 a year.
No, this is where I'm a little confused, excuse me. So we have only like 2 or 3 restaurants in town. So we would be getting, or that serve food, we would be getting $10,000 to $15,000.
We would be, so,
Could be.
yes.
So
collectively.
to Carrie's point, which I think students can't be charged, but maybe faculty can, so that, could we charge, yes, we would have to find out, could we charge that tax to the faculty of Gordon and collect that revenue? So if they have a few hundred teachers, I don't know how many, the professors, PhDs, right? If they're eating, how many are eating a day, is that extra revenue we can have? Is that where you're going, where I'm
No,
understanding
so
your point?
10 to 15,000 is an estimate. My question is an estimate
Does that
of what?
estimate
Is that
include-
2 retail stores in Wenham? Is it 2 retail stores plus 4
Yeah,
caterers
they just
registered
give
in
you,
Wenham?
yeah,
Is it what I just mentioned plus,
Okay.
they just have a
4,000
dollar amount.
meals a semester at Gordon? I don't know what that's from.
Okay,
And,
then I have the same
10 to
question.
Yeah.
So you're looking
$15,000.
which types of food service establishments the DOR is charging meals tax to? For caterers versus retail versus at-home residential kitchens, like what is the makeup of the people that are having that meals tax? Is I think,
Yeah, we don't get that number, we just get one number.
Yeah, I guess when we can move on, just again, throwing it out there for now at this stage, is how comprehensive is that estimate? Like, what are you capturing, what are you not capturing? Is there something more that can be captured than what's in that estimate?
And anybody can go on DLR's website right now, and you can pull up the meals tax by community. You'll see it runs out through some point in, I think, either 2018 or 2019. So what I did is just went back and took 12 months, back a year and a half ago, and it was between $10,000 and $15,000, I forget the exact number. And then just, based on a year and a half's time, it'll increase a little bit, but that's it. That's all. We don't have much information to deal with.
So it's 0.75 of the 6%?
It's 0.75 of
Or
the,
additional.
it gets, 0.75 gets added when somebody goes and buys something.
Another line.
Okay, so if Hamilton passed it, you said, right? Does that mean every time I go to Walmart,
Yeah, you
Yes.
get another,
Yeah.
no,
I get an extra, like,
Mhm.
okay.
It's going directly to the town of Hamilton via
right.
the
They
DOR.
have more
Obviously,
retail
yeah.
establishments, but I think they passed it in 2009, and my impression is they think it's been worth it.
Oh, it's money that you wouldn't have gotten.
And nothing, other than passing it, I think this was a good question that someone asked at the selectmen's meeting where we discussed this, is that other than adopting the local option at town meeting, which would get the language from KP Law, it would be brought to town meeting, we talk about it, potentially adopt it, then that's where our work is over. The DOR manages the data, the DOR collects the money, they just cut us a check. So in terms of staff capacity, it does not, other than, the warrant article prep, that's the only
That's it.
impact in terms of staff time locally.
So why haven't we explored this then? That's,
because
we're
it's,
doing now.
because it's chump change in the grand scheme of things.
yeah,
Basically, to be blunt, and also I think there is an element, I'm not opposed to it, I'm not entirely indifferent, it does make sense because you're picking up additional revenue, but it's not gonna solve our problems, and we're not likely to have, food service establishments, restaurants, bars, whatever, on the order of even what Hamilton has anytime soon, right? / never. So, and I think there's an element of retailer unfriendliness, wherein you're raising what they're collecting basically at the register, at point of sale, right? So that you are imposing upon them an additional tax, which technically is not imposed by the state, right? It's participation at the local town level. I don't know how true that is, how much of that is perceived, or does grassroots even care? Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's not all Wenham residents anyway, so you're not double taxing, residents per se, because you are, to the extent that they're residents who are patronizing these restaurants and food
It's
service,
definitely on the consumer, not on the business,
Right.
but
Yeah.
it can affect the
for sure,
business.
you're right. It's on the consumer, but
Right,
of course, we all
reduced
know it
demand,
wouldn't.
yeah.
We know it probably wouldn't play out that way, but I think there's just that element of sensitivity with respect to host,
Yeah.
hosting these establishments.
I agree, and I think when did I come on FinCom? 2 years ago, 3 years ago? I mean, we've talked about meals tax very briefly in passing, but I guess I feel like where we are now, in the reality of our budget situation, it's worth offering up, other revenue streams, and then letting the town decide. I just feel like it's our due diligence to offer what we can and uncover what we can, and then let the town decide if they want it or not.
That's fair, yeah.
Where would we find out if the professors would be taxed or not, or how a college would work?
It's on DOR, and I'm waiting to get, it may be in my inbox. I've been
Yeah.
sick for a few days, so I'm not
Mhm.
totally caught up. Research that Hamilton did.
Okay.
Yeah, we can certainly ask the DOR. I mean, we're not the only municipality in the Commonwealth that would be looking at the local meals tax and have a university or a college in their municipality. I mean, I think I don't know.
Beverly does, so we could.
Yeah, I think it's something we can find out for sure.
I think it's worth exploring for the question.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a revenue source, if it's 0.75, so
Mhm.
for every dollar you're spending 0.7 of a penny. And it is kind of chump change, but once it's in there, or if it works out, that, I kind of agree with Carrie. I think if it's a one-time warrant thing and then we're done and there's no
We're
extra
done.
work.
Mm.
Because I think in the original meeting, you were saying, hey, we're trying to find nickels and dimes, tend to
Yeah.
end up for a while. You know, I don't want to overburden our, you know, our restaurants, but if it's something that we explore, town meeting doesn't like it, it goes away, but if there's a way that between the Airbnb and the catering and maybe the college, I think we should explore it.
Yeah.
So I can do it on myself if you want, or what you said you already did, or are you reaching out, or will? I can't see the mics or anything.
I
I'm waiting.
haven't reached out or anything with this. but,
Carrie, if you have some information you want to pass it through, and then I could always speak to the DOI and get the CMRs on the meals tax, because it's in there.
Yeah, there's information from, I think, 2009, 2010, when Hamilton passed it. That was, I don't think I've gotten it yet, but I'm waiting to get the presentation that was made at town meeting when it was voted.
That's great.
It was voted yes,
Okay.
the first time it was presented.
Do you know how long ago?
2009, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's been a
Maybe
while then.
2010,
So it's been
yeah.
precedent for a
Yeah.
while. Yeah, okay. So,
No, we have to-
sounds like we can move ahead, but it sounds like we're all supportive of going after it. And it's a vote at town meeting anyway, right?
Right.
Residents
Yeah.
just say yay or nay. And there's no reason not to raise it for them,
Yeah.
for consideration to your point.
If it's worth, yeah.
Yeah, if it's 10, 12 grand, that's good.
For these other,
15, 20.
are we doing, just go to hit the slides?
Well, do you want to talk about, do you want Chris to talk about
I don't know what the revenues are.
these at all, or do you want to just move right into the policy options?
Is that on the next slide?
No, Chris was just going to speak to it, like, really briefly.
All right, let's let Chris speak briefly to the operating budget updates
If it's not over 10 grand.
when they're ready.
Is that in this packet here?
The operating budget updates?
Yeah.
It's in that memo.
It's in it.
We're going to the first page of the
Moving
memo.
on to the operating budget, so,
Okay.
as Jackie briefly mentioned already, from December, we're at a $1,131,000 deficit. We've gone through it, we got it down to a $1,072,000 deficit. The major things that we were able to just go through, like Jack's saying, and cut without affecting services or personnel. A lot of it's coming from our LED Green Communities Light project we did. So we were able to factor in all those savings from the conversion to LED lights, which is gonna come up to about, close to about $20,000 in savings for all the departments. The library itself is at, 16,000. That was the big one. And then also the fire department, from that rec transition, is gonna have a savings of approximately 12,000. And
That's North Shore Regional, yeah.
so that was a lot of the major breakdown that we were able to reduce at this point. The roof leaf pickup was also, Jackie discussed, that was part of the capital. So it wasn't, we didn't include it in this pocket, but that was another big 45,000 that we were able to decrease. The drop in savings doesn't look as big because we added the library capital project from before. It was to be discussed funding process, and we moved it to the general fund, so that increased the general fund by the 93,000, which the offset from the 61. So that's why the the savings wasn't as great as the numbers add up to be, because we added in the library.
The LED light savings, so is this, why are they factored in now and not originally? Is it
Because they just did the
conversions to LEDs?
project. The projects have just been completed. Like Town Hall, I think, was completed last month. Along with the police fire, the library was
Oh,
the first
yeah.
one. So we're there, so we're building it into the savings we're gonna start seeing
Okay.
going forward. Because they gave us an estimated chart of the estimated savings for each building they did.
Got it.
Yeah, so in other news, we'll have about 6 months on the new LEDs. So hopefully our utilities are down across the board when we come in into May and June and we get to that tighter part of the year. So that's where we may see a little bit of free cash coming from next year. Obviously not huge money, but, you know, enough to help us with any kind of, you know, May and June is always a little tight. So we'll see those savings, and if there's no issues at the end of the year, which is great, then that'll fall off to free cash for next year.
Sure.
The COA gift account, what, is that how much money is in that, and how is it restricted,
So
is it?
the COA gift account has, I believe, about 18 to 20,000 in there, I believe.
No, after the van.
Oh, yeah, no, they
Yeah.
bought the van. Yeah, so probably around like 12. And so what mostly that is Jim does a lot of programs, exercise programs and stuff, and he'll charge fees for people to come do it, and he'll put that money into the gift account, where it's, the expense is coming out of his general fund expense, and he's been paying for it with general fund and then putting the money in the gift account, so we've been saying, you gotta start using
Using the fees that you collect.
the
to pay
fees
for the
you're
expenses.
collecting to use
For-
the
for it to
programs
work
you're
this way,
doing.
yes, yeah.
So that's what he's putting together he's starting to work on a policy to start offsetting those expenses with the gift fund revenues taken in, and this is his first step to doing that.
Essentially a fee for service for those exercise classes. I will say the gift account, sorry to interrupt you, the gift account, as folks may remember, historically has been a really critical asset, in that we have never had to pay out of the general fund for the COA van when we've had to do our share of the state match. So we have a relatively new COA van, and we had the COA van before that. So the gift account does manage the local share of the Mass DOT grant for when we get an updated passenger van. So that's where most of the money in the gift account is coming from, are our seniors who are utilizing that van. And it comes in, you know, small, less than $10 trickles. So that's where Jim, in the past, has you really focused on that being a van in and van out account. But now with this new exercise class pass, he's gonna use it for that as well.
I thought he had to pay the people doing the classes, though.
He does.
We do.
But
So-
that money,
That's what
Is-
this money, so right now he's been paying them with his general fund,
Oh.
so we're gonna have him
He's
start
have to
paying
take it out
them
of the
through
gift
his
fund.
gift. Because that's where when he's taking the revenue for them to take the class, he's putting it in,
Got it,
so
I got it.
we're gonna, and it's just been building up, so we're getting him to start
great.
spending it,
Building it down.
yes.
Do you have anything
I think that was the quick overview.
on insurance?
All right, so, one of the things that we did, and I think we mentioned this, is that we wanted to look at healthcare. That's obviously a larger expense. So we sent out a questionnaire to employees that have our health insurance and said, number one, if you were on the more expensive PPO plan, if we gave you $1,000, would you switch to the HMO plan? Another thing that we did is that if you're a single person or a single plan or a married plan, and you had the option of taking a spouse or maybe taking a parent's, and we gave you $1,500 for the individual and $2,500 for married plan, for married, would you switch to your spouse's? So, the results of the survey was that, yes, some people, what was it, one?
4 people would opt out, and 1 person said they would switch a PPO to an HMO.
So just with doing that, Chris has calculated that we would have almost a $55,000 savings by doing that.
Subtracting,
No, good.
subtracting the $2,500 or $1,000. So that's the net number.
That's the
That's the net.
Okay, wow.
Wow.
And I want to say that we had 32 responses to the survey, but we do have 44 people on town insurance, so we don't know.
We got a good response, but we didn't get everybody. So could we get more? Hopefully. Now, what I'm planning is to meet with the PEC, which is the unions and the representatives, to discuss this, as well as, other policy decisions that we could do is, you have to offer the higher PPO, the indemnity plan by law. Nothing says that we have to do a 75-25 split. Now, for unions, and it's built in, we'll obviously have to negotiate with that. But for non-union personnel, like I had talked to some people and said, and I'm one of those that's on the PPO, and I think I'm probably the one person that said, I'll switch to the HMO. But another employer said, why don't you do this? And he says, well, my wife, and I just can't do it, she has too many medical issues. He says, I wouldn't even have a problem paying 50%. I said, well, that could happen, if we wanted to switch that shift and go to 60-40 and have the employees that are on that higher plan, which costs us a lot of money for that indemnity plan. That's an option too. That's a policy option that can be made. So at the very least right now, we have that, and we have the potential for more. It's just a lot more work to get involved with the PEC and negotiate this.
A strange question. Out of this total, how many are collective bargaining employees?
That we don't know because it was
That wasn't one of
no
the
names on the
questions.
survey, yeah.
We kept it,
Gotcha.
Anonymous.
yeah, we felt we would get more responses if we
Good idea.
kept it anonymous.
So can we go over the opt-out again? So the 1,000 proposed for potentially change from PPO to HMO makes sense. What about, so can you go over again how the 2,500, was it?
Yep, for
Or-
family.
Yeah, you want to take that, Chris?
Yeah. So right now, anyone that is on, the current insurance, like right now, I was one of the ones that said I would opt out. My wife, we're pretty similar insurances. It was just ours was a couple $100 cheaper, so we went with ours. So to do that, I would gladly switch over the savings. So it was just a way that, by us paying someone $2,500, we're still going to be saving on average, depending on the plan, $6,000 to $10,000 on top of paying someone else. So
That makes perfect sense. I wasn't following closely enough when you originally went through it, and I was thinking there was a shift from one Wenham covered plan to another Wenham covered plan, but it's off altogether.
It's off altogether.
Yeah,
you
it's a
completely fall
buyout
off.
of the plan entirely, so to,
Yep.
Right.
so to speak. Seek coverage elsewhere,
Mm-hmm.
likely through spouse, and 3 of those were under the, what's BB family? Blue Cross Blue Shield. so-
no, it's there's the HMO, there's a Focus and the PPO. What BB? I don't know what. No, I think.
I don't know, I don't think the BB's relevant. I think
No.
it's the HMO versus the
Yeah.
Focus versus the
Yeah.
PPO
Yeah.
or the 3
Yeah,
plans.
okay.
That's up to you guys, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
How is the $1,250 and $2,500 treated? Is that salary? Is that a bonus? Does that get rolled over into the next year? How does
So-
that get treated?
It would be like a stipend, it wouldn't be rolled over to the next, it'd be an annual stipend, but it
And
wouldn't
you-
roll
you
into
could-
the
One
base.
time.
You could pay it
One
out
time.
differently, like when I
Like
was in
longevity.
Somerville did this, and they did it, every month you would get a portion of it, but you could pay it at one-time lump sum. It would just, it would come in your payroll, that would be a decision we'd have to discuss on how we want to pay it out, if you want to do it at one time.
Would he do that in '22 as well,
Yes,
and '23?
yeah, as long as they stay off it.
So we do currently have an incentive for folks who don't take our insurance, but it's $300 a year, and you get it with every bi-weekly payroll. So I think when I was not taking the town's insurance, I think I got $13 a paycheck for not taking the town insurance, which wasn't much of an incentive. So we do have things, so right now that small incentive is paid through the biweekly payroll, but we have our longevity that you get as a lump sum payment on the anniversary of your start date that, you know, comes up every 5 years or 3 years or 10 years. So there's different options for how we would pay it out. I think that's something the selectmen are looking for. They would want to have a policy in our employee handbook for how that got handled moving forward.
Right, and the associated dollar amounts in that would be spelled out in that policy? I mean, would they be subject to change, or could they be legally, or is it not known at this stage?
They could be subject to change.
Okay.
But they wouldn't increase, like currently, sorry.
It's not gonna, it's not like a lot of our stipends that they increase with the COLA. No, this
Is it the town's discretion to say, it was 2,500
Yeah,
5
we
years
just,
ago,
we
but
just
now
picked
it's 1,800?
2,500
I'm
because
just
that's
saying
what
that.
other communities,
Yeah,
so
right,
was no magic that you had to pick that number.
Yeah.
That's just what,
yep.
I think Somerville did that, right?
I believe Somerville was 3,000.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
We were
we
there.
were a little cheaper.
And I thought that this was a one-time opt-out payment, but did you just say it's an annual?
It's an annual opt-out, so
Incentive?
it's an incentive that we still save money if you
Right, I
choose not to
understand,
be,
yeah.
and so we have the open enrollment every year in the spring, so if someone, you know, had to come on the plan because like life circumstances change, that would be okay, but if someone's consistently opting out, we're consistently annually saving money on them not being a part of our
To the
plan.
tune of 55,000, given the current
Well,
And so we,
uptake, potentially.
possibly that number could go up.
I would-
Healthcare goes up 3.5 points a year.
That, and you
Yeah.
tend to find that others follow suit. They're the early adopters, and then, oh yeah,
That's
I was
right.
Oh,
thinking about
that
it too
works,
last
yeah,
year,
yeah.
and then you get better.
Healthcare never disappears.
so this shows that we have 16 people on an HMO?
Mhm.
Is that right?
Currently, yes. Well, the HMO family.
That's just the survey results though, right?
No,
Is that- is that everybody?
the top plan, the top one is currently.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's
And only
current.
one person, sounds like you, opted to go to the HMO, so there's not gonna be anyone in the HMO saying, well, why am I not getting paid
That-
for staying in the HMO?
Well,
Still 26, but it's down from 29.
well, I think, Carrie, what you're talking about is like,
Oh, no, I think, no, you're right, sorry. No, that should, the bottom one, sorry, the bottom one should be changed to 7, I'm sorry, you are correct. And the family on HMO should have went up to 14, that's a good catch, yes, you're right on
Carrie,
that
can you
one.
ask your question generally?
That's what you were saying,
again,
right?
though?
Yeah, I think my general question was, are people that have chosen the HMO, which looks like a good chunk of people, gonna say, well, hey, we chose the HMO to begin with to keep costs down for everyone, and we never got an incentive to do it, versus like one person who said they would go from PPO to HMO and get paid for it annually.
Well,
There's a
that would-
total of,
They're
there's a
paying
total
more,
of
too.
9 people in the PPO, 1 individual and 8 family. So to answer your question, those people that are already in, it is what it is.
And they're paying more too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're paying more too.
I know,
Yeah.
I understand that. It's-
Yeah, this is something that we implemented now. It's like anything. There's always gonna be somebody that's gonna benefit from it and somebody that missed the boat and.
Right, it's the missing, I wonder if anyone's gonna say, oh, I missed the boat. Yeah. Okay.
It wasn't offered last year. It's
Yeah,
offered
I mean,
now.
enrollment.
Carrie, to
Yeah,
your
yeah.
Everyone
point,
misses the boat
to your
once
point,
a
I
year.
took
Right.
the
When
incentive
it
for a
closes.
number of years,
Which
and
is why you
now
wanted to
this
be
is a
on.
much
They can
better
catch the
incentive,
boat the
so
next year.
it's
Yeah.
all, it's all the
Won't be
timing.
back.
And we don't have to belabor it, because I see there's only one person who
No, that's
chose to do that
individual. I'm
anyway.
a family.
Oh,
No,
oh,
I'm
okay.
a family. The individual,
Oh,
I don't,
right.
you know, I'm not sure who that individual
Well,
is.
I don't think we need to figure out who it
Anyway,
is.
Yeah.
never mind.
I think
We can
that's,
move on.
No,
we'll let
I'm
them,
grouped with the 8.
we'll let them remain
So-
anonymous.
But you could, no, go ahead, Alex.
I was just, so if the bottom numbers need to be updated, agreed, we don't need to, it's not who's where. We'd like
Yeah.
to send an updated version if.
Yes,
you-
we'll do, yeah.
Mike?
So you could implement this at any time? Well,
We-
open season.
Well, yeah, we'd have to meet with the pack, and we'd have to talk about what we want to do, and
How?
certainly, there may be other things that we may want to try to get in addition. So, yeah, right now, we're starting to gather the list and see who I have to meet with and
Yeah.
have that discussion.
Okay. All right.
I mean, it's real savings, it's compelling, I think, it's an option, and it's hard to fault the town for offering this. You know, employees aren't being forced out of their healthcare.
Nope.
I would,
And for some people, it could be great, it could, you know,
Yeah.
could be a real incentive.
absolutely, yeah, it's meaningful money, and high deductible probably wasn't entertained at this stage, probably wasn't on the table yet, but that's always something down the road to consider too.
Yeah, we have, we're in the last year of our 3-year cycle.
Yeah.
So you jumped out of GIC, I think it was 2 years ago, So,
This
they,
second year.
yeah, NFP said that we'd be looking to go out to bid,
Next year,
and
right,
is that something? Obviously, we have to negotiate that, but,
right.
yeah, that's
As an
certainly,
option along
yeah,
with
there's
this,
certainly,
But this is a great plan in terms of cost savings because it also is not at that point affecting the employee's interface with their health insurance. This is really on our side of things, on our monetary side, which is a good thing in terms of employee satisfaction and being happy to be here.
Right. Okay.
Cool.
is that Pleasant Pond?
Yeah.
So, just without, you've heard the Pleasant Pond story.
Yeah.
I think one thing that we are proposing is first of all, Hamilton the town manager called me and said that their FinCom is not interested in continuing to subsidize Pleasant Pond. So,
So you got a pool.
yeah, well, so with our original thoughts right now is that we would do the swim at your own risk and not do lifeguards. That could be a savings of approximately, what was it, $12,000? Of course, with that, we would be looking at increasing the fees. Right now, it's only $25 per year. And there's other, second cars and so forth, but we'd also be looking at increasing that fee to what, we don't know yet. Is it 50? I don't know. And if Hamilton opts not to participate any longer, which they can, and if we want to still offer it to out-of-towners, do we have an out-of-town rate? So, that's, again, policy decisions that can be made. Is this just gonna be for Wenham residents, or do we wanna allow out-of-towners at a greater cost?
Do we, I'll wait, this is just information at this time, okay. I don't wanna get in the weeds, we're in the weeds too much. No, I'm good.
So you could just, I don't know if there's any other questions with Pleasant Pond. I think we've kind of,
And I want to clarify that Nikki did speak with Maya. Nikki Roebuck works with Maya, and there would be no increase to our premium with Maya if we go through the risk management process with signage. So we wouldn't lose the lifeguards and then have to pay more in insurance if we go through that risk management process and add some
That was
signage.
my question.
there you go.
No, because you got
Yeah,
a
Insurance
higher
coverage,
potential.
Right.
yeah.
of-
And we did look,
bad
that,
risk.
Yeah, we
that's
did.
on our radar as well.
Right.
Yep.
And I think if we go out of town, we should limit the number of out of town, if that's possible.
Yeah, those,
Uh,
many
Good luck holding
policies
them back.
decisions.
I
Yeah.
know. Everyone's fine.
Line it up outside the door.
So do those, in this plan, if we went to no lifeguards and no gatekeepers, is that?
No, we would have the gatekeeper still.
What are the, so they open and close,
And they do the parking and they do the raking.
and they would be there.
They'll be checking the stickers, making sure.
Okay, so it's elimination of the lifeguards.
Mhm.
But you still gotta do water testing, you still gotta
Oh,
do
yeah.
the float.
Yeah, we checked.
So this is
Yeah, we checked
still
with
not a-
DEP. We're pretty.
This is
If
still
unless we
a
said
minimum.
no swimming at all and had that signage, we're pretty. I'd be
Still
very
need to
surprised
test
if
rate.
DEP ever let us not do the water
Really
testing.
minimal cost.
Yeah, it's like $1,000 a summer for the water testing.
Yeah, it's not.
I just have a quick comment, walking in the middle of the conversation, is I am in agreement, if this goes through, it's fine, but it's just unfortunate because those are good jobs for teenagers.
And that's we
And
still.
it's hard, those are hard to come by.
I would say to your point, Carrie, we will still offer the gatekeeper positions, which it skews a little younger than the lifeguards. But I want to clarify that I know from Chief Perkins, anecdotally for the past 2 or 3 years, it has been a big challenge to find lifeguards for the pond. They really go towards the pool, at the rec pool, as well as the Gordon pool a lot more. So I will say, to your point, yeah, absolutely, those summer jobs are really a great resource that we can provide, but at the same time, there's not a huge audience for pond lifeguarding. We only ended up with 5 this summer.
And we have to pay 3 of them
Is
to
this
get
the summer though,
certified
when
to
we
be a
combined it with
lifeguard.
the pool lifeguards and synced up their wages?
The wages are synced up, but the lifeguard certifications and all the work that goes in with pond versus pool, most kids are going for the pools.
Yeah,
And
Oh, they're different certifications.
yeah.
Yeah.
has anyone floated,
No pun intended, I was just.
Wow, there it is.
just canceling the whole thing? Did I miss that? Did you guys talk about that?
It-
Just doing a no swimming? I'm
Oh.
not saying I'm a proponent of anything,
Yeah.
I'm just weighing all options.
No, that really wasn't on our radar screen.
Okay.
We didn't go all the way there.
But is it fair to say it's sort of with BOS as a service policy with respect to offering of the service or meaningful
Yeah.
change to it? That, at this stage anyway?
I think
mean, we can-
we're exploring it.
We're exploring it with them. I think that they recognize it. There's no official vote has been taken, but
Yeah, I just meant in general, I didn't necessarily mean to shut it down, I just meant with regard to this proposed change to not have, or that you're not proposing this change, but to potentially not have lifeguards.
I think-
That's a policy decision
I think
apart.
the compelling piece that's actually not on the slide is that if you look at this is the breakdown for the summer that we just completed, and with the revenue number for this summer was roughly $3,500 between the two communities. So we're just covering expenses right now and nothing of salary. So I think that's the issue, is that if Hamilton is pulling their piece of the pie, which is up to $10,000, because if you look, Hamilton is starting more and more to make up a great deal of that sticker count. But
Yeah.
even between the two towns, it's only 3,500, and then we lose that 10,000 as well.
Yeah.
We're going to be paying the full boat of that 25,000,
Yeah.
which is challenging to justify as a service right now.
Yeah, their participation is make or break effectively with respect to the viability of,
Yeah.
of
You know,
lifeguards. It sounds like.
it's a hard decision. It's, you
yeah.
know, it's service people really, it's very beloved, but
For sure,
we have to
yeah.
look at every stone right now, leave none unturned.
Because then it's tough too, if you raise the ticket prices, are as many people gonna buy them if the cost is higher? So then
Right.
that's a factor when you look into it as well, is like trying to, how much you wanna raise it, so you still don't deter people from not getting them.
Yeah, I mean, it would be worth just as sort of an exercise to just
See
do
what
the
the
quick
fully
numbers
loaded-
and see what the fully loaded cost would
Yeah.
be, just so we could help people understand that they wouldn't want to entertain the Wenham only current service level sticker cost likely.
Yeah.
Anyway, anyway.
Yep. All right. So, we're back to water.
Okay.
Only the other kind of water, the drinking water. So, one of the things that, you heard me mention is that, and Patty brought this up too, that we just didn't believe that we were getting our true indirect costs from the water department. So, they do pay for, and it's down here, so they pay for SoftWrite, they put postage, they do pay their health insurance. Kelly and Ryan, which is the billing, gas and electric they pay for, and their phone. But then, as you see up here, there was this other slew of expenses that really the town's picking up and subsidizing the water fund. So you have the insurance, including workers' comp. You have town council. You have town administration, which is
You, Jackie, and Nikki.
me, Jackie, and Nikki's time that's devoted to that area. We have the finance team in processing the bills. That's Chris, that's treasurer, that's the assistant treasurer, and then the audit services, because we're auditing that section too. So, and what we did is, I went to the community, I went to my colleagues, and I spoke to the town manager in Rentham. And they actually had a study done by, I think it was Pioneer Institute, on what indirect costs should be charged for these categories. And that's basically what we used as their study. Now, do we want to commission a study? Sure, we can commission a study, it's gonna say the same thing, and we're gonna end up spending $20,000 to get that number. So we just went with what Rentham had for percentages. So that's how we got that. And those are percentages that, it's not just Rentham. If Pioneer gets selected by another community, they're coming up with the same numbers. That's how it works. So we factored in those percentages to these costs, and we'd be looking at asking the water department to pay an additional $86,000 of indirect cost. Now, what does that mean? They'd have to raise their water rates. The water rates haven't increased in, I think it's 2009. And, personally, I think that they should have been going up incrementally, and they should have been building up their retained earnings to cover some costs that are out there. But anyways, it hasn't. So that would mean there'd be a water rate increase. What we didn't factor in though, into that top is, anytime there's a water leak, there's only 2 people in the water department, so they rely upon our DPW to assist them. So we could have up to 3 people and some equipment that's working on a water leak. And what was the number that we have annually?
That doesn't get billed back on an
Not
as-needed
currently.
basis,
No.
kind of ad hoc?
No, and so we're not even,
Yeah,
we're just saying,
not
you know
seeking
what?
to capture
Forget
that,
that.
right.
Let's just stick with the 86,000 and, you know, that's just
Bill said 8 to 10.
8 to 10 water
Leaks a year, and it takes about, he said it takes about 4 to 6 hours of work to fix each one.
Yeah.
So just so everybody knows, we haven't even factored that into the
That's,
86,000.
that's pretty much 10 full work days from the DPW's time, if you,
And
if you
when
think
you
about
look at
it.
that, based on the Rentham percentages, you
Mhm.
say, yes, that makes sense that finance is, about 43K and town administration's 23K. I mean, that passes the laugh test to you, like that seems like it's reasonable.
Good question.
That's what most communities that I've looked at are all using those percentages.
But I'm not just talking about the
Yeah.
percentages, I'm talking about what it feels like in your office, that the town administrator and the finance
Absolute
department
dollar terms.
use.
So I think-
And I know
Yeah.
that's tying a number, and I think it's great that you use the percentages, just do those numbers make sense to you, and when you go through your, weekly work?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
how much time you're
Right.
spending on water?
So I think
Is it more than that, is it less than that?
The finance one is easily yes. The answer could be yes. I don't think of my time and Nikki's time and Jackie's time, so we really haven't thought about that, so if you ask me, but, there was one issue that came up with regard to one development, and it was water related, it took all day. It took one day of my time, so, I don't know, I just haven't really, the 43 for the finance, absolutely, they're doing quarterly
Yeah,
bills.
we send out the bills, we collect all the
And they have to
bills.
quote them.
I do process their bills, send them out, do their journal entries, so I would say that definitely the finance is,
Yeah,
It's
I think
easily
is maybe, like, on a comp standpoint, if you were to sub that out, if you were to hire somebody to do exactly that only, is it a job that would set us back 43,000, for example, or more or less? Like, I think your question's a good one. Like,
Yeah, just
looking
does
in
that
dollar
make
terms,
sense,
does that
kind
seem
of?
reasonable?
Well, I mean, to kind of help quantify it a little, I mean, like Nikki manages our web presence. She manages our website. Anthony manages our social media. Those are things that they do for the water department, so that the water department doesn't have to do just that by themselves with only, because really they have the shared administrative assistant with cemetery, with DPW, with tree. That's, I think 13 hours a week of that person's time. So there's things that are happening where, Nikki's buying office supplies for the building and ordering those types of things, and, there's just things that are happening that
Yeah,
if
compared
that went
to,
away.
for that 23,000 carry, when you're talking about maybe $250,000 worth of salary, yeah, I think that's,
And I'm not doubting it,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, when you take those percentages and you lay them on top of our reality, does that make sense to you?
it does. It does.
So let me ask you a question about process. There's a water commission, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right, so they're the ones who establish the rates.
Right.
Right, so don't you have to go to the water commission, get on their agenda to have them approve or disapprove?
So I did reach out, and I had a meeting with the chairman and told him this was coming, or we were looking at this.
Yep.
And, originally, I think we were talking about over $100,000. And then, we were at $49,000. And I just said to him, it's somewhere in between that we're going to be looking at. And we'll share the information on how we got to these numbers, but it's real expenses that right now the town's really subsidizing. So I have all the reports from Rentham that I'll be happy to share, as well as this spreadsheet, which we will share at the conclusion of this meeting. We just want to go through
This
the
is
Board of
in there.
Selectmen and FinCom.
This is in their binders tonight too, the hard copy of this,
Who's binder?
the FinCom's binders.
Yeah, but
So
I'm
you can
saying
skip
for the
this.
Water Commission.
Yeah.
So Mike, yeah, so they know, and they're waiting for me to send that sheet.
Okay, so you're working to get on their agenda, for that, because I'm assuming that would be an open meeting discussion. Okay.
So, I'm jumping ahead here probably, but, and I don't know if my arithmetic's correct, but we have 86, let's say we go with the 86,000, just, and we have 1,400 households. Is that right?
What that would mean in a rate?
No.
We actually have more like 1,000 water customers because
Yeah.
we do have some folks, in
Private
this,
wells.
in Parsons Hill
Beverly.
that are on Beverly, and then we do have the private wells, and Gordon is on Beverly as well.
And I think some Hamilton has some.
So you're talking maybe about $70 a year
Say it this morning.
per water bill?
It all depends, because we have an ascending water rate, so
You can't
it,
just do a flat across.
so they could, I'm guessing what they probably would do is put something on everybody, increase it, and
Yeah, I
then maybe
talked,
tear it
I
on.
talked to Eric about that. He's got a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet all set up that he can go in and just plug numbers in, that he can plug different scenarios in to get to the number we need. That would, so you could just do it all like a base rate, so it hit everyone, or you can do like a little bit in the base and then do it on tier two. He said tier two is the majority of people are on the tier two level, which I think he said was like 10,000 to 15,000 or whatever that one is. Gallons. So, you know, he can just put it there, so the people that don't use a lot of water won't really feel it. You know, the older and elderly that don't use a lot won't really feel it, and it'll hit the people that in that bigger tier. So there's different scenarios he said he can work at, and he's got it all in a sheet so he can just plug in. So
And that's their call.
That's the
That's their
commission's
call.
call.
that's the commission's call.
Right.
How
But-
they-
but
how
I
they wanna
think we're all on the
structure it.
same page with regard to that non-linear application, you know, balancing the size of the people impacted, right? Like who fits into what tier and how much they're impacted percentage-wise. Because we, you know, don't want to double everyone's water bill, but theoretically you could if you just took the straight average.
Well, I'm just trying to get a big ballpark.
Yeah.
It has all the
Is it
customers.
like
How much was
15,
it?
18 bucks a quarter, 20 bucks a quarter, something, you know?
Right, with all the
Right.
other impacts we will be.
Well, and I think, Jim, to your point too, we also don't know what people have in their house for water reduction technology. We,
Right,
you know, we have, you know,
I know it's complicated, I'm just
Yeah.
trying
It
to
is,
just
yeah.
get a, now, just one other thing about this is this an area, and not for tonight, but is this an area that we could maybe, getting back to your Gordon and the pilot stuff, is this an area where we could go to Gordon and say, hey, can you help us with our water bills? You guys are big users.
they're not our
They're not our
users.
users.
They're the Beverly Salem
Oh,
Water Board.
what's that one now?
Done and done.
They're Beverly?
Could think,
They are,
yeah.
yep, but that,
They're all Beverly?
Gordon College, Parsons Hill, and I wanna say Hall Street, that neck of Wenham is on Beverly Salem Water
Okay.
and sewer.
Wow.
So we don't have, sorry,
We can tax them when they use the lake for backup.
yeah.
That's where we'll get them on.
Okay, well, that's,
So I had one thing on this. The spirit of it is we're looking to get paid for services that the town is providing.
That they couldn't exist if they had to, you know, if without the town. They couldn't
Yeah.
do those functions without
Of course.
support.
Of course, and net effect is increase in expected revenue in the '21 budget should these changes materialize, right?
Yep, so if we increased it by 86,449, we would have to show an increase in revenue of 86,449.
Do we have any recapture of anything related to the water? Like, are we billing the water department for any of these services today?
So if
So
you,
the bottom one is what we,
It's right here.
so they already paid for their health insurance, SoftWrite, their postage, they pay for their billing, their electrical, their phone, their postage, so,
And
they
we're
are,
thinking it's really 2x what they're paying.
Right.
Yeah.
Ballpark,
Yep.
ballpark. Okay, thank you, thank you. Makes sense.
oh, and in your breakdowns, for, as like light reading at home, we do have the breakdown of the different salary pieces, as well as you can look at the water actuals and what we're estimating for the items that we're talking about for these indirect costs as some nice homework, until we meet again.
Okay.
Light reading.
If you need some, yeah, it's light reading.
All right, so I think you've heard this story before, but trash. So, obviously, when you're in a structural deficit, you look for reductions or new revenue streams. The one of the things that, we've talked about before is the trash, the rate increase with Wheelabrator going up 20% this year. Do you have another slide, Jackie?
I would be happy to keep
Thanks.
moving these along.
So, and I think you've seen some of these.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
just the breakdown of Casella and the collection, the recycling, and then that's the incinerator cost. Okay. By fiscal year, as you can see, recycling's really a big story here, and then also the Wheelabrators increases. But, from FY '17, when we basically were getting paid to recycle, to where we are right now. So it's just been enormous increase. It's an increase that's gone above the limitations of statute, Proposition 2.5, which just means, it's growing at greater than 2.5%. So we're not fully taxing and being able to keep up with this. You can hit the next
Okay.
slide. So this is, next few slides are
For
just.
the record, lots of things increase at rates greater than 2.5%.
Yeah, true. This is one of our most, the health insurance and then trash is probably our two biggest expenses,
Percentage-wise.
percentage-wise,
Yep.
in town. So, just in looking at recycling, this just shows you that we're really not, the cost increase is not based on we're recycling more. This pretty much shows it's been pretty consistent on our tonnage of recycling. And this is the Wheelabrator, this is the trash goes to Saugus and gets burned. So again, it's pretty much on track, and we're doing the same tonnage,
Was that for
roughly.
this past year?
These are, so it's by fiscal years down here. So the blue is FY *17, the red is FY '18.
Oh, okay, I see it, yeah.
It might be, unfortunately, on a black and white, you're not gonna
I got it, yeah.
see that, but, so the tonnage is the same. So Wheelabrator cost, so what the red line indicates is the spike. So this is 22.59% increase for FY '21. So Casella's bringing that trash to Saugus to burn, that just increased. So we're going from $66.89 this fiscal year to $82. And then it's increasing by 3.25 for each of the remaining 4 years in that contract. So, options that we talked about. This is the option A, which is fee increase across all households. So, you've seen this slide before, we've talked about this, but in the event that we were to charge $100 per household at 1,400 households, we generate $140,000. That means that the taxpayer is paying $25 per quarter for trash. And it goes up, 150, 200, and these are the numbers that we can generate.
But
as far
number
as-
one still doesn't cover all your costs.
No, it doesn't cover the
Okay,
cost.
all right. I was
Yeah,
just
no,
confirming.
it's just,
It's an escalation.
this is just what options that we could select. I think it's a policy decision,
Yep.
Listen, none of us
These are
like
deliberately like clean $25, $50
It's
increments.
just the way
just-
we structure things in the warrant book. You want to see the big revenue numbers, but we also want to make sure folks can see that impact to the,
Yeah.
To
that
what their
quarter
impact
impact
is.
for the
Completely.
household.
Yeah,
Nice to see
Makes
the,
it meaningful
mhm,
for people to know what they're voting on.
right.
absolutely.
So,
This
so,
doesn't need a town vote, though. okay?
This is,
Correct.
so no, this does not need, this is, selectmen have the authority to institute that fee, yeah. But if we were, just to say, if we were to look for recovering the full amount, that means less than $78 a quarter per household.
The tax rate is the same, let me rephrase that. There's no reduction in your tax rate, so whatever that is, it still is, plus a fee.
Well,
Yes.
you made a statement, but it could be, and it's the right one, Mike, a lot of residents might, astutely point out, where's the reduction, the corresponding reduction in
Mhm.
not the rate per se, but the dollar expenditure on the expense side in the operating budget, since
Yep.
I'm now subsidizing the trash.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, and we all know this, but, it does kind of beg the question, well, where, if I'm helping to subsidize here, what are we doing on the town side to also cut? You're cutting me out of the equation as equation as a resident paying for trash, in part, potentially. And so what's,
Alex,
that
and I-
So
revenue
is the answer to that, is that for the past X years, we've had an override,
Yes.
significant deficits,
but,
and this would reduce the deficit?
so more explicitly, okay, if we're paying $140,000 collectively as residents, show me that the override is exactly $140,000 less otherwise, is
I
really
don't
what
think it would be that clean.
that's kind of, but that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
That's the-
I hear it. No,
the
I
legit
hear
Yes, but
question
it.
that's
that
also
one
not
could ask.
acknowledging the reason why, you know, a more fundamental reason why this issue exists is because the cost
The
of
historical
refuse,
increases. Yep.
collection and getting rid of it.
Yep. Yeah, I think the tradition of the town having borne the cost entirely is not common. Is not, is certainly not the direction that communities are going, from what I understand. And it is increasingly common for towns to share the cost with
Well,
residents.
Hamilton's done it.
I think, yeah, true, but I think we need to be careful there, because there are all these political crazy
Oh, there's all
motivations,
kinds
and
of,
Hamilton is
there's all
always.
kinds of stuff online about the
Yeah,
questions
for sure.
about it.
And
That's
And I
clear.
just wanna go on record now as saying, anything that I were to potentially support here the motivation would not be, environmental, like, the goal of reducing trash for Wenhamites. Like,
Yeah. I
that's a
think-
nice side effect if it happens, but I don't think we're in a position to say like,
And I think that was what Hamilton, from what I understand, was going
Where they
after
were
more of the
going.
environmental.
hence the political
Sustainability.
Yeah,
aspect.
this is
Right.
strictly looking at our financial
Financial.
situation. We've
Right.
had the structural deficit, we're really using free cash to subsidize the budget, and it's just, the model's going down with the free cash, and it's not a sustainable, formula going forward in the future. Could we scrape by a couple more years doing that? Maybe.
Yeah.
But eventually, something has to give. And we're trying to do that now in good economic times than when we hit a recession, and then that's a real difficult time to do things.
And I mean, in my opinion, the environmental piece is connected to the financial piece, because of the environmental cost of disposing of it is going up, then the cost to our budgets are going up.
It could be, agreed, but it's how directly you
Yeah,
attribute
Right.
it and link
yeah.
it.
I think it is
Either-
related, but,
Yeah.
and I think doesn't make sense to make it totally separate, but, yeah, I'm sitting here having this discussion, how do we cover our costs with user fees? And if the user fees cause people to, generate less, which they did for us, good. If you wanna generate what you generate or generate more, just pay for it, is my take on it.
Does this increase personnel,
No.
No.
collection,
This,
an
this,
additional collection?
I want to clarify, and it is on the slide, that this is to maintain our services as is. So that's the other piece of the puzzle, is if this is not something that the town wants to look for this year or in a future year, do we want to have a conversation about lowering cost by reducing the services that we offer? So this is an as-is financial proposal versus, going down to that every other week, or however the collection versus the processing looks. Yeah, it's a good question, though. It's
I asked
absolutely.
it before, I just wanna see if
There's
it's the
other
same
options
answer.
too, you got here too, from what we discussed last time.
Yeah, there is the,
The bag option.
there's the bag option too.
Our current state is sort of a kind of bag option too, for
So,
additional.
so you'd have to buy all the bags, you have to put all your trash in our bags. I think this is a more difficult to impose, we're not a community that has a lot of stores, now you're really going out of town to get the bags, and if they, the revenue is it's a variable, it would be really difficult to budget on.
Forecast.
To forecast what the revenue would be, whereas option A really gives us a real solid forecast and potential revenue.
So is this just for trash, doesn't include compost or recyclables, or just trash?
That is, the bags is trash. Option B
So-
is when you buy bags, it's for your
Just for
trash.
trash, and there would still be, in this option, pickup for compost and
Absolutely.
recycling,
And there's,
with no additional cost.
compost is affected in neither option,
Yeah.
Jim.
Okay, but just to be clear
Yep.
about, okay, so it's just the black trash barrels.
It's the black trash barrels, but you gotta buy our bags to put your
Right,
trash in.
but it would impact that.
Yeah. So I think that, we have a, so, one thing that we got out of the selectmen last night, although they did not take any formal votes, I think the message that we got is that their, feeling of they'd like to see maybe 2 warrant articles. One with the full override amount, so let's just say, we're at, let's just say $1 million right now. And we're gonna use that $400,000 balance of free cash towards the operating budget, so say if it's $600,000. That would be option A. Option B, they had some discussions now with the trash fees. There was discussions with, well, if they didn't vote that, then the next selectmen's meeting will vote and impose the trash. But you really can't do that, as Jackie pointed out. The town meeting's appropriating the expense. So you can't do it after the fact because you have to have the balanced budget going in. So what the selectmen would have to do is take a position on the trash and say, yes, we'll raise the fees come July 1st in the event option A of a full override does not pass, then the next budget will have fees attached to it, and it might be a lower, smaller override, or maybe no override at all.
Just
you
the
know,
fees.
Just the fees. We don't know that, how that's gonna match up yet.
So they wanna have one warrant including the school override? 'Cause that's
Yeah.
always been separate.
No.
We haven't even, we're not even talking about.
Yeah,
schools.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
just town
This is
side.
This is just the town side.
Got it, okay.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you. I got,
Go ahead,
May I?
because
Yeah.
we always
So-
had it, we've had this, yeah, it's always been
Dave,
two.
just to get
so-
kind of in the familiar, before we start getting into the warrant article season per se,
Yeah.
we typically have had that Article 1 as our levy limit
Yeah,
budget,
yeah.
Article 2 as free cash, and then Articles 3, 4, sometimes
fun
5
ones, yeah.
have been, the fun ones, the ones that have those different policy options. So a couple, like last year, we highlighted the OPEB piece for the schools as part of the override, and we broke those, the selectmen made a policy decision to break those apart. So for something like this, what really came out of the discussion yesterday was offering, article, doing the traditional levy limit budget and the free cash, having one article that would be the option of a full override to hit the balance that the town would be looking for, and then having the second option based on if there was a combination of trash fees and an override. So giving the voters that policy option, but structuring it in a way that we would come out of town meeting with the appropriation that's legal and that would allow for us to, be able to move forward and have it a tool that the selectmen could hopefully decide on by the end of February, so that those choices could be very clearly done in the warrant book, and we could be doing public education in March, so people understand what the override means if it passes, what the override means more importantly if it fails, and what that second kind of smaller override, maybe fee or just fee option would be. So it'd kind of be, if you recall how we did marijuana a few years ago, there was the
We
stacked
never did
option.
marijuana. Nope.
Well, you didn't, but if you recall sitting there for marijuana, we had that option where if,
Yeah.
if one passed, we'd skip another. So that, we could do that as kind of set up again.
Okay.
So are the selectmen looking for FinCom's opinions or recommendations on any of these? Or have
I think that's our
they
job.
decided? I'm hearing both sides, so I'm not quite clear.
I think that's our job, our mission.
I'm just asking.
I wouldn't be, I think, I wouldn't be surprised if we have maybe, I don't know, a joint discussion where we cover a lot of these things once we've kind of narrowed it down, taken the 80% off, and we're down to the 20% options remaining for each, so that it isn't a whole marathon day. To
Right.
basically express our support or lack thereof for each bullet and the 2 or 3 options within each, or whatever it may be. Maybe there's only one option
Right.
within it. I do have a question. So, loose leaf was not something that is, I see here as a pending policy decision. So is that's off the table entirely, like POS, or, because that's a meaningful service change. Arguably, many of our public services are being potentially affected.
Again,
materially.
a vote hasn't been taken, but we
Okay.
what we presented was the elimination of loose leaf. When
Okay.
we're talking about need to close that
To-
gap.
To tighten.
So
yeah, okay.
that's what, again, they did not vote on that yet, but was what was presented last night as well as tonight, that is gone.
And I think to your point too, something Alex that, we could have had a bullet for the capital program, so that was actually a missed
Yeah, good-
bullet.
right,
The
good point.
capital,
Right.
I
That's
think
fine.
to your point,
Okay.
that's on here as well. It was
It's fine.
a lapse.
Yeah, I gotcha. Okay, cool.
Right, so some of these policy decisions ultimately is gonna let us know what we
Yeah.
need to make up.
So it feels like, so in years past, we did a lot more kind of departmental back and forth. Can't we, do we really need to do the COA roof? I trust we're gonna do it this year, for 25 grand, whatever it is. Don't tell me if it's twice that. But whereas this year, it's more on the policy fees. And, we've got the, insurance, the health insurance, I think was good to consider. We've got the water, good to consider. There's a tiny bit of upside relative, meaningful money, but relative to the big structural deficit that we're up against. Whereas the meat of our, aside from going through each department, as we will, in full detail and really sink our teeth in the budget, but we'll also have the layering on of these sort of in the same way that we did the capital expenditures to defer or to tackle for FY20, right?
Yep. I think
And a lot of these will involve close partnership, I think, with the select board.
Yes, yep, I think that's fair to say.
And how that happens, how that materializes, if we just kind of take a vote independently and then it gets represented, maybe with representation at their meeting or meet jointly, I don't know,
Yeah, I
let
think
us know.
the selectmen, the ultimate goal is for selectmen and FinCom to be on the same page going into town
Sure.
meeting.
Yeah, I agree.
And
I agree.
certainly, Jack passed that information on and made that real clear last night. He'd like to be able to pass something off to you, the direction that they think that they'd like to go, and then you do your thing, and then have that joint discussion and close, and come up with a final agreement. But, yeah, it's more policy this year, no question.
Can I add one other
Yeah.
small item? Something else that we did talk about yesterday with the board, that the FinCom's done in the past, is that getting to some final decisions hopefully by the end of February. I know that feels like really tight, but if we can hopefully work to some final decisions by the end of February, so that whatever those decisions are can be communicated in the warrant very clearly, and we have a good amount of March to work with the public, do some public education, maybe a budget forum, maybe some, smaller chats at the COA. Give both boards the time that they feel that they need to, communicate to the public to get a good public outreach strategy and understanding during March. I think that was something we came to yesterday, was hopefully making decisions then so that we could strategize really well about
There's some
outreach.
difficult decisions that are impacting the residents, and they're not easy decisions, and even talking about them is not comfortable for anybody. But it's things that we have to talk about now, and decisions that I think we at least have to come to.
Anecdotally, the two big things I think are the biggest are the trash and the loose leaf pickup.
Mm.
I think everything else is,
That are what, that are
that
the
would be
biggest
the most,
impact to residents?
yeah,
I
or not
agree.
big, or made the most questions, most
Mhm.
talking about would be that. Well, the. Outside the override.
The 800-pound elephant or gorilla.
Schools that we.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
historically, we budget for 3, it's anywhere from 5 to 9. right,
Well,
in the last few
9
years.
is hugely anomalous because they folded in 600K into their operating budget from debt rolling off.
Yeah.
Which we need to call out. Unfortunately, again, we now have to adjust it. We have to have the unadjusted and the adjusted going forward forever.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate that that window kind of, that window's kind of closed. But that's, so we're gonna call their percentage last year what it was, which was super high. And off that original base from, in my opinion, the year prior to FY20, from 19. We still call it off that. It's unfortunate, but anyway, we don't have that number yet. We do on the 12th, is that it? Anyone recall that date?
19th or
I know they're
22nd
meeting
in my
tonight.
mind.
I think they're meeting tonight. I don't know what they're, we have a joint on the 29th?
Yeah, I have
This is my
questions about
calendar.
schedule.
Yeah, we had the calendar before. I was just gonna raise that we should probably need to fill out that, remember that kind of line item bulleted calendar from the past few years? that
Oh,
we
yeah,
used?
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
this
Oh,
date, this
oh,
date, this
oh.
date, yeah.
Yeah.
Like as Jackie was just saying, through February, have big decisions made by the end of February, that's
Doesn't leave us a lot of time.
3, 4, 5, 6, that's 7 Wednesdays.
And assuming, and by the way, we don't have to do Wednesdays, so, we're gonna have to probably have some real quick coordinated calendar.
Is it a Valentine's Day tradition now going on?
Alex, I have.
It's a Friday this year, though.
29th in my calendar. Did Julie send out?
I didn't see anything about, what is that?
February.
It says joint FY21 budget meeting.
With the school?
I think that was old.
Was that
Wait,
old?
January 29th?
Yeah. It's in my phone.
Okay.
So she must have sent a calendar invite.
Gotcha, okay.
I can see if we can get some clarification, just the schedule.
Okay, and just not only the calendar with the school budget items in those joint meetings, but our FinCom, where we had
Yeah.
basically, I guess it encompassed both, it was just our own.
That was nice to put on the fridge, so
Yeah.
you know it has,
Yeah, exactly.
know what's coming up.
I can drum up last year, so we can try and repurpose it.
I mean, so at one point, we were kind of thinking every other week, but we might need more than every other week.
Definitely, yeah, we're going to.
So we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah, just at the very beginning, how that was kind of get us through the fall season and have a placeholder at least, so we could have something on our calendar so that we didn't, go out to dinner or whatever without potentially knowing that we had, yeah, God forbid. But then, early we're thinking that
Alright,
in the throes of it, probably,
Weekly?
yeah.
Yeah.
At least we should plan on it. Do Wednesdays, just real quickly, I know Wednesdays aren't great for you, I totally realize. Are there any days that anyone can say of the week are no-go? Fridays, generally no-go?
Wednesday's the best. for
Wednesday's
me.
the best.
Wednesday can work for me.
Okay. Tuesdays or Thursdays ever completely off the table or sometimes viable?
I'm good any day.
Okay, so,
I would clarify that the selectmen start to get
That's
into a
Tuesday.
weekly pattern on Tuesdays too, so
Yeah.
just thinking of, this room and this space, that's something we could have Nikki, Alex, send you a list of when this room is available, like Wednesdays, and I think she's booked for the FinCom for the most part,
think
but,
I-
overextended.
I think I have this room on the 22nd.
yeah, other than that, Carrie,
Yeah, for the women's.
for the
Right.
Mother's Club, right?
Mother, oh, yeah.
okay,
But-
so let's plan then on Wednesdays
What-
at this stage.
Every week.
Yeah, and I think we probably wanna go as soon as booking next week as well, cause we'll probably have some developments.
So we're looking at potentially next Wednesday?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
we wanna secure that, and then if it comes around that we don't need it, we can always scrap it, but we just have to have the meeting, posting in advance.
We'll just let Chris know what departments you wanna have available.
Right, for if we have questions or need to review, right?
And I have a question about how the information, for example, for today was distributed. I usually get it all by email, but I forward it from Wenham to my Gmail. And was the agenda sent electronically?
I got it from Chris, maybe I didn't forward it to you, that could very well be.
I got the memo and the.
'Cause
I got the memo,
PowerPoint.
I was gonna touch base with you, Alex,
Right.
after, about how
How to
going forward,
get it
if
fill
you,
out.
if you wanted me to give you the agenda first and then you distribute it, or you want me to give
You
it.
can just blast it
To
to
everyone?
everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause
If
I
you
got
could.
Anthony's stuff, but I didn't get the agenda or other things, which is
Thanks,
fine.
Dave.
Thank you guys, see you guys next week.
It was the agenda, like I just mentioned, I just emailed you, I wasn't sure how we
Okay.
want to go about that, so I wasn't sure if Alex wanted to review it first and
Okay.
pass it on to you guys, so going forward, I'll just send out to everyone. All the other attachments, all the other information I sent to everyone, just the agenda and the RFT I sent out to, just to Alex.
Oh, okay,
That's
yeah.
fine, so something I didn't forward something that I didn't need to forward, although the agenda would've been helpful. At this, where we're in the thick of it, I'm usually good about turning them right around to
Yeah,
everybody.
no,
but
I was just curious. I thought maybe I missed something. It's fine. We're all getting rolling.
we're gonna get- Yeah.
Oh.
yeah,
Getting
but-
rolling.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get caught up to steam on how the meetings go and
We all
everything
are.
and get.
Still.
We'll get caught up on minutes and things like that over the next meeting or two.
And then, well, never mind. Remember, we've done minutes a few different ways.
Yeah.
Like sometimes Patty would go through it and then send it to you. Anyway, I don't know if we need
Yeah, I
to
was
figure out
talking to
a way
Catherine,
to
that's
do
what, that
minutes.
was the plan, she gave me some minutes yesterday, I didn't have a chance to review them, that's why I didn't put any, so I was gonna do the same thing, she was gonna give them to me, I was gonna review them, and then I will give them,
Do you need
forward
Chris
them
to
off to
do
you,
it
right,
first?
do you need them back first? Okay.
I don't need you to, I personally don't think you have to review them first. They can,
Okay.
as far as I'm concerned, they can go from you to everybody. Or if you wanna go
That
via
works,
the
yeah.
just.
That works, that's what she just said, that's how Patty did it, so I was
Yeah.
gonna keep it
Yeah,
the
we've
same,
done it
but
different
if,
ways, which is why I
I
brought
think
it
it'd
up.
be good if you
I
get it in
know-
advance, you can read it, any questions, you
Yep.
can have it ready for the meeting.
Save yourself a step.
yeah,
One less email to forward.
okay, yeah, just send it to everyone, perfect,
Kate, take that off your desk.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we've got next week then, next Wednesday, 6:30 is a
Yep.
placeholder.
Yes, sir.
All right,
Are you
great.
gonna go the 22nd, the 29th as well? I've heard
Not
every
the
week, and
22nd.
I've heard the 15th, so.
Why not the 22nd again?
So the 22nd, there's a Mother's Club
Oh,
meeting
okay,
here,
okay.
like a local government thing,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like a
Switch- we can
local,
switch to another.
Could I switch if,
They can move.
yeah.
so, we'll plan on it tentatively. If we were in a position to know that we didn't need it next week, we could always bump it, but we'll probably best, I think, keep those three for now anyway.
So just the 15th for now.
And, no, and 22nd and 29th
Yeah.
as well,
Because
right?
we're
All on the same
gonna move
page?
location,
Yeah,
yeah.
we're gonna need it, yeah. If we have to meet upstairs or something, we
Yeah.
can, right?
I got
Yeah,
it.
if you want it televised, we could always move it to Buca. We could talk to the schools.
Oh, that's right.
Oh.
We
Okay.
need to do that if we wanna, yeah. We can figure that out.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much for all this information. Great work. Yes, sir.
Sorry.
Yep.
I just got the meals tax email, maybe they were watching us.
I love that.
That's cool.
Yeah, so,
Hamilton
do
sent
you want me to forward it, tell you,
Yeah,
everyone?
could you?
Want it? Okay, sure.
Yeah,
That's
I'd be curious to read it. Yeah, thanks for
Love that
reaching out to
someone
them.
did that.
Thank you
Was
for
it their
watching.
FinCom that sent it?
No, it's Corinne Kale,
Okay.
who, I don't know what she was doing back in 2010, but, she presented the warrant article, and it got passed.
Oh,
I think she just did it as a citizen. I don't know if she was on the town.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I make a motion to adjourn.
second.
Sounds good to me. All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Jim.